I'm quite sure some countries are analyzing it now and are making plans to add Bitcoin to the reserves or switch to legal tender, which El Salvador did. So it's very interesting to see the Chinese government buy real stuff, hard assets. Of course, the hardest asset in my view would be Bitcoin. We won't go down anymore, and I think you have to protect yourself against that feeling, because I know how that feels. You think it will go to 1 million straight up. But I like your argument. It's the DCA army, the hodlers, the army of hodlers that's constantly adding and not selling. You could, for example, see the 200-week moving average. That's a 4-year moving average. That's an indicator, technical indicator that sort of measures the average price of the last 4 years. And that measure goes up. Always goes up. It never goes down. And Bitcoin monthly closes never fall below that 200-week moving average line. So it's a very interesting indicator. And I guess that's indeed that's how I long-term would see Bitcoin. It always goes up, and there's a lot of volatility above that 200-week moving average, which you should ignore. And it goes up. In the long term, it all goes up. But it already did that, right? Last 10 years. And I think next 10 years could be like that. Not necessarily an acceleration of that 200-week moving average. And that is the fact that if you look at the stock-to-flow model, and I find that very important, then the Bitcoin price is above and below the model value each and every year. So it really oscillates, like you call that, around that model line. It really stays close to the model line. And that's a very important thing. And there was a whole co-integration discussion when the model came out in 2019, which is very interesting. And that sort of hit on that fact that the Bitcoin price stays very close to the model, and there were also some sorts of formal tests for that possible co-integration, which in the end we could not apply because stock-to-flow is not a random variable. But it's a very important thing, nevertheless, that in my opinion, that the price of Bitcoin is below and above the model line. So people have to sell everything because they lose their job or their company is in bad shape. They need money. They need the money in dollars or other fiat, and they need to sell their assets. So I guess that sort of stays. On the other hand, like you say, personally, when I sell Bitcoin, then I have this cash on my bank balance sheet. It feels like more risky than having it in Bitcoin because the inflation is eating the purchasing power of my euros away. The banks can block the account, freeze the account, can do everything with the account. It's much better feeling to have it in Bitcoin and going up all the time instead of having it in fiat. So I'm personally selling only what I need for food and stuff, but not more than that. I could see, but the counter argument, of course, is that if you keep it in Bitcoin, you should be okay and at ease with all the volatility in fiat terms of your stash, right? You should be okay to see it half in dollar terms, and like we saw in May and June when the Chinese ban was there. And if that's okay, then because you know that it on average it will jump back again, and on average there will be this 170% growth rate annually, then this is the most perfect investment there is. So yeah, I'm also very hardcore in that I'm okay with the volatility and keep it in Bitcoin rather than turning it to cash. But in these very distinct crisis situations like March 2020, some people don't have a choice. They have to sell. And of course, leverage is playing a part here as well. One of the reasons that there was a big sell-off in Bitcoin, a very steep sell-off, by the way, in Bitcoin.
In the minds of people out there, they might still be confused because you're not clear whether that was the top or whether we're still about to go back up again.
Yeah, and it's always interesting to go back in time and look how you felt in March 2020. Were you close to selling, or didn't you feel anything?
Were you trying to stack hard?
Switch off the monitor and go sailing or running. Yeah. And that's, by the way, why I say when the price goes down, I just switch off the monitors. I do a tweet like I'm sailing or I'm running. That's really what I'm doing then. I'm just switch off the monitors and go away from the desk and into nature to not have to look at it. Because you might be overcome by fear and sell. All of us have made individually earlier on, and that investors have to do, and institutional investors have to do right now. To buy Bitcoin now would mean you're one of the first people or countries to do it, like El Salvador did, and they get all the flack for it and also all the compliments. But from the traditional world and the IMF, for example, they get the flack. So it's a first mover advantage, but it's also a first mover who gets all the critics. So yeah, you have to have balls. You have to have a small country country with a leader that can do such a big change. But I guess it makes a lot of sense, right? It makes a lot of sense because the alternative is to be rescued by the IMF continuously and eternally for smaller companies, but also for the bigger companies. The central banks play such a large role at the moment. They save all the banks in 2008. They saved all the companies after COVID, March 2020. It seems that even the very big countries like US and all the countries in Europe cannot operate without the money printing of the central banks. It's either that or hedge a little bit into hard assets like Bitcoin or gold. I find it very interesting what the Chinese are doing at the moment. So they're buying, they of course have a lot of the US debt, a lot of the US treasuries. And if something were to happen with the US dollar, in hyperinflation or a debt rescheduling, then of course the Chinese treasuries would be hit. And what you see is the Chinese are buying a lot of stuff in real stuff, right? The gold mines in Africa, cobalt mines, all the commodity mines in Africa, all the strategic important infrastructure like harbors in the Middle East and Europe and even in the US. So it's very interesting to see the Chinese government buy real stuff, hard assets. Of course, the hardest asset in my view would be Bitcoin. It's better than gold, scarcer than gold in a few years, and more portable, more divisible. It's thermodynamically the best thing there is. And some governments will figure that out, like El Salvador, which is of course a small country, but I guess that will see some other countries following that up, and then it becomes easier and easier for other countries to adopt. They're not the first mover anymore. I'm quite sure some countries are analyzing it now and are making plans to add Bitcoin to the reserves or switch to legal tender, which El Salvador did, which is a very ballsy move. But Bitcoin is so much more than an asset. It's a way of living. It's a culture. It's a revolution, a new geopolitical thing. It's much more than. But an investor, of course, a traditional investor, a big institutional investor, he doesn't mind what he's investing in. He looks at all the investments through the same scope. And that is risk return. If it's better in risk return terms and within his mandate, which Bitcoin is not at the moment, but then it's okay. If it's better, they go there. They'll add it to the portfolio, and but they will never fall in love with Bitcoin like we do. But a model, I think that's a good point to make. A model is not broken by the first miss. A model is never 100% right. It can't be, because it would not be a model, a simplification of reality. So there will be misses. This is a miss. It's a big miss, but it should be a one-off. If it keeps missing, if it's not continuing, it's nailing the other month's track record, then it's not okay. But missing 1 month is not a problem for me, at least.